So you want to ski in Colorado, but of course you don't want it to end up as those horror videos we've all seen online. There are dozens of things to consider in planning a ski vacation, but having extensive experience specifically in planning both day trips and resort vacations in the great state of Colorado, we have quite a bit of advice to give. Here's our step-by-step process to book the best ski vacation in Colorado. Alright, to start off, you're going to want to pick a time to go. Ski season in Colorado often runs from mid-October until early June, but those bookends aren't a good time for a trip for the vast majority of skiers. As far as October and November skiing is concerned, it's typically a write-off unless you're an absolute diehard. Most resorts will only have a few runs open, if they're even open at all. Those runs will be artificial snow, groomers only, and will probably feel quite crowded if going on a weekend due to there not being as many runs to spread people out across. Overall, I wouldn't recommend the true early season in Colorado for a vast majority of visitors. Booking a trip in early December is quite risky, as what's open will entirely depend on how much snow fell in November. November is the second snowiest month of the year for most of Colorado, but most resorts don't have much, if any, advanced and expert terrain open until late December. The upside of booking a trip around this time frame, however, is that you are virtually guaranteed not to encounter the lift line apocalypses we strive so hard to avoid. Weekends are generally safe throughout the lead up to Christmas, and of course, weekdays are absolutely devoid. If you're a beginner skier, then this is a decent time to go, as most resorts strive to have all of their beginner terrain open by Christmas, meaning that new greens are opening up all throughout the beginning of December. Do beware that you'll be skiing on mostly artificial snow, which can feel firmer and icier than natural snow. The sole exception to everything I've said for this time frame so far is Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek often opens a large majority of their terrain throughout November and December. Barring an exceptionally poor start, Wolf Creek will offer some of the only off-piste tree bowl and even mogul terrain in the state throughout the beginning of December. It'll be quite sharky, and is best suited for advanced and expert skiers only. Alright, now we get to the time frames that most of you tend to consider. Let's start with the December holiday period, specifically from a few days before Christmas through a few days after New Year's Day. Most kids in the United States have this entire time off from school, making this the best time for families to book a ski trip. That does, of course, come with a few downsides, one of them being the massive crowds you can expect, particularly in the week between Christmas and New Year's, but also a few days before and after that period. This is the only time frame in which going on weekdays doesn't significantly improve crowding. It does improve it, yes, but not nearly as much as a Tuesday 2 weeks earlier. Generally, resorts have most of their groomers and anywhere between a few and most of their non-groomed runs open. This can still be a hit or miss time, but generally, even if one region of the state is having a rough go of it, somewhere else in the state is decent. If planning well in advance, I would recommend booking a trip for later in the season if possible so that you don't run the risk at all. But if you must, the holiday period is both a great and terrible time to take a Colorado ski vacation. Next up is the core season, running from the new year through mid-March. This is when the snow starts to get really good and most resorts move towards 100% open. This is also when you see these so-called weekend warriors really start to populate, especially at the I-70 resorts. If at all possible, avoid Saturdays at all costs throughout this time period. If not, we'll discuss resorts in a second, and you can use resort choice to somewhat counterpoise the crowding issue, but it's still not going to be as good as it could be if you're able to make it out on a weekday. If memory serves, statistically, President's Day Saturday is the busiest single ski day of the entire season, so definitely strive to avoid resorts like Breckenridge, Keystone, or Winter Park on that day. The peak season typically has the best conditions, but it also has the crowds. Pick your poison. Just after the core season is the shoulder season, running from mid-March to the first week or two of April when resorts start to close. This is my personal preference when it comes to booking a ski trip. In our experience, the last 2 weeks of March tend to still have decent snow, with almost everything at all of the resorts open, with only a fraction of the people. For whatever reason, when March rolls around, people stop skiing, especially by the time we get to mid-March. One of the downsides is that this is the time of the year when the afternoon sun gets particularly intense and temperatures start to go above freezing. This can lead to slight slush at the end of the day and very firm conditions the following morning. However, I personally prefer slightly less optimal conditions with significantly less crowds, but to each his own. From that early April transition until the last resort closes, typically Arapahoe Basin in early June, it's the pure late season. Entire resort areas close, often more quickly than not and with minimal warning. Snow gets slushier and slushier. Look, there are some people that love this type of skiing more than the entire rest of the season. That's fantastic. However, with so many resorts closing and large swaths of the remaining resorts going too, the lines and crowds in late April and May are often greater than they are in mid-March to mid-April. This so-called spring skiing is significantly different from anything else on this time frame, and if you want to ski late season, you already know. If you're sitting here wondering what in the world I meant by that last statement, I would recommend that you avoid late season skiing. Once you've decided on a time to go, it's time to pick a resort. You, of course, can do it in the opposite order, but we recommend picking a time frame before a resort, because oftentimes, the best choice of resort depends on what time of year you're going. Many of you will want to consider an Epic or Icon Pass. In Colorado, the resorts on the Epic Pass are Beaver Creek, Vail, Breckenridge, Keystone, Crested Butte, and Telluride if you get the full Epic. The resorts on the Icon Pass are the Four Aspens, Copper, Winter Park, Steamboat, Arapahoe Basin, and Eldora. Either pass is a solid choice, but for lower level skiers, those being beginners and intermediates, we would recommend Epic, while for upper level skiers, we would recommend Icon. Pairing Beaver Creek, Vail, Breckenridge, and Keystone into one trip is very doable, all of which are on the Epic Pass and geographically quite close together. On the Icon Pass, Arapahoe Basin and Copper Mountain are close together, but the rest are relatively spread out. There are a ton of different categories to determine the best resort, so in order to keep things concise, here are our top major resorts in Colorado for a variety of different categories. For beginner terrain, we recommend Beaver Creek, Crested Butte, or Loveland. For intermediate terrain, we recommend Snowmass, Breckenridge, or Purgatory. For advanced terrain, that being single blacks, we recommend Vail, Steamboat, or Winter Park. For expert terrain, we recommend Arapahoe Basin, Crested Butte, or Telluride. Those choices, of course, encompass a variety of terrain all at the same difficulty level. What about resorts for purely one terrain type? Well, if you want the best groomers, Snowmass, Breckenridge, and Beaver Creek would be our picks. If you like moguls, definitely strive for Winter Park. For bowls, Vail is the obvious choice, with Breckenridge or even Winter Park and Keystone offering some decent backup options. For those who like pure shoots and extremes, you can't go wrong with Silverton, but outside of that, Crested Butte and Telluride are very strong. For trees, Steamboat is the surefire pick, with Wolf Creek a close second. Of course, terrain is good to consider, but what about the lines? Well, typically, avoiding the lines requires a sacrifice. If you want a larger resort with as small of lines as you can get, Beaver Creek, Telluride, or Snowmass is your best bet. Be sure to avoid Keystone, Breckenridge, Vail, and Winter Park. If you're okay with a medium-sized resort, Aspen Mountain and Aspen Highlands very rarely see crowds, and Loveland, Wolf Creek, and Arapahoe Basin tend to do a good job managing their crowding. If you really truly want to escape the crowds, however, head to Monarch, Sunlight, or Powderhorn. Those are smaller, much less developed resorts, but you'd be hard-pressed to ever find a line longer than 10 minutes, even on the absolute busiest days. Okay, so maybe I'm okay with any terrain and can tolerate some crowding, but I really want to avoid that I-70 traffic. Well, in that case, you can head to Eldora, which lacks in size but makes up for it in pure accessibility. An alternative option is to head to Crested Butte or anything south, namely Monarch, Telluride, Wolf Creek, and Purgatory. However, those require either long drives or flights. If you're going to fly, then it's not out of the question to fly into Aspen, Hayden, or Eagle to hit pretty much everything from the backside. This is all to say, avoiding I-70 traffic in Colorado is very doable, but it's often either time-consuming or expensive. We have a video tentatively scheduled for next August that will discuss this in much more detail, but if you have any questions about accessing a specific resort for now, drop them in the comments below. And if you have any questions about our top picks for a specific criteria, don't be afraid to drop them below as well. Now that you've determined what resort you're going to go to, you have to decide on lodging. This is where things can start to get really convoluted, especially if you're visiting resorts along the I-70 corridor. There are a couple major types of lodging. Hotels often offer free breakfast, an on-site restaurant, and daily or near-daily room cleaning. A rental apartment or condominium typically allows you to cook your own meals to save some money in that aspect, but you also have to take care of everything yourself. Hostels are a more communal type of lodging, but they are significantly cheaper than the other two. You can book hotels and condos at most resorts through the resort's website, but I would highly recommend avoiding that. If you're looking to get a hotel, use the official website. If you're looking for a condo, use Vrbo or Airbnb. A trick we've used before is to book a cancelable hotel and then look for new openings on Vrbo starting about 2 weeks prior to the trip. Oftentimes, people cancel their trips, and the owners want to fill the condo, often for less than they would have charged before, so then you can get a cheap condo and cancel the hotel. For the most part, you'll have two options. Stay at or near the resort, or stay further away in a larger town and day trip. The major differences between these are cost and convenience. If you day trip, you're usually sacrificing convenience to save some money. It's as simple as that. Something that a lot of people overlook is searching for hostels, especially if you're a solo traveler. There are plenty of hostels to be found in Colorado. Another good option is what I'm going to refer to as intermediate towns. The towns that aren't big cities, aren't full day trip range, but also aren't true ski towns or mountainside accommodations. For I-70, these are towns like Glenwood Springs if you're skiing Aspen, or Georgetown, Idaho Springs, or Evergreen if you're skiing Summit County or thereabouts. A lot of people stay in Denver, and if you're going to do that, I would highly recommend finding a hotel in the suburbs of Golden or Lakewood. That tends to be your best option if you're looking for the cheapest option possible. In those intermediate towns I mentioned before, you can often find decent prices if you book well in advance, but if you're within a couple months, it's going to be almost as expensive as staying in the ski towns themselves. If you're on a budget, you're not going to want to visit Steamboat. There's not much as far as intermediate towns in the area, and lodging at the resort and in the town of Steamboat Springs is incredibly expensive. The same can generally be said for Telluride. As is typical for this channel, we're going to now give you 3 insiders picks for a trip in Colorado. One fantastic option is to fly into Durango-La Plata County Airport and stay in the town of Durango. Durango isn't as busy or expensive as towns such as Breckenridge, but still has the authentic mountain town feel. Wolf Creek and Purgatory are both within day trip distance, and Telluride is also doable for the dedicated. Outside of skiing, riding the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad is a fun activity, especially if you have kids. The upside of this trip is it avoids major crowding and traffic headaches that you'll find further north. The downside of this trip is that the resorts aren't on the major passes, and Wolf Creek and Purgatory aren't the largest or greatest resorts in Colorado. Another option, if you want to hit Summit County, is to fly into Denver and stay in the towns of Frisco, Dillon, or Silverthorne. Drive up the night before you ski, not the morning of. From there, the Icon Pass resorts Arapahoe Basin and Copper Mountain, and the Epic Pass resorts Keystone, Breckenridge, Beaver Creek, and Vail are all within 1 hour. Outside of skiing, walking through the town of Breckenridge is a fun way to spend an evening. There is also the Frisco Adventure Park, which offers snow tubing but sells out quickly, so book your time in advance if you want to do it. There is good public transit in the area, so you won't have to drive as much if you don't want to. The upside to this is that you get that authentic Colorado ski trip that everyone talks about, and you have lots of options. The downside is that this is going to be expensive and quite busy. Our final recommendation is to fly into Eagle County and drive west to Glenwood Springs. Within an hour-and-a-half drive of Glenwood, you have the Aspen Quartet, which is relatively well-rounded as a whole, and Sunlight and Powderhorn, both of which are much quieter, smaller resorts, and are members of the Indy Pass. Sunlight and Powderhorn aren't exactly what you imagine when most people think of Colorado skiing, but they can still offer the big mountain feel if you're a beginner or intermediate. If you're an expert, I wouldn't really say they're worth it. The Aspens, however, are a different story, offering a little bit of something for everyone. If you feel like throwing away your entire life savings, you can stay in the town of Aspen, but we'd recommend staying in Glenwood Springs to save money. There is a bus to Aspen from Glenwood if you don't want to drive and pay for parking. Outside of skiing, there is the Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park, and of course, the Glenwood Hot Springs. Do beware that Interstate 70 through Glenwood Canyon closes quite frequently, so be flexible with your flights and lodging on the bookends of your trip. The upside of this trip is you avoid the Summit County crowds while still getting to say you skied Aspen. It offers some more authentic local hills for those who prefer a more old school feel, and it has some awesome non-skiing options if you want a rest day. The downside is that your resort options are relatively limited, and you can get stranded if I-70 closes. Alright, so now you've got a time, resort, lodging, and you know how you're going to get there. So now it's time to fill out the rest of your trip. You can start by determining what you'll do in the non-skiing hours. As touched on above, look for hot springs, and most ski towns have decent après in Colorado. If you're looking to take a day off from skiing, most resorts offer some form of mountain coaster or snow tubing, and Keystone has a large snow fort. Almost all of the resorts offer some form of cross-country and snowshoeing trail network. Local adventure parks are a good pastime, and you can also look for local snowmobiling tours, sleigh rides, dog sled rides, or other such activities that are good in the winter. As far as the skiing days themselves go, you've got lots of things to think about. On-mountain dining can be expensive, so it may be worth taking your lunch or taking a bus or walking into town to get food from a cheaper restaurant, although the town restaurants often aren't much cheaper. Parking is a big thing people often overlook. Lots of resorts are starting to require reservations for parking, or at least in the good parking lots. Determine where you want to start your day and plan accordingly. Do you need a reservation? Do you need to pay? Do you need to walk a ways or take a bus? Save yourself the headache of a nasty surprise the morning of your ski day by being prudent in advance. There are dozens of other factors to consider. If you're cooking for yourself in a condo, where, when, and how are you going grocery shopping? Are you driving everywhere in a small mountain town with very little parking, or are you going to take a bus? Should you have dinner reservations since lots of restaurants fill to capacity by 6:30? As always, if you have any questions about all these little things, drop them below and we'll get back to you with our advice. Planning a ski trip is a complex and time-consuming endeavor. We want to make your life easy, so we hope that this video helped, and we appreciate you watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please consider subscribing to help support this dream. As always, any and all questions and suggestions are welcome down below. Thank you all once again for watching. All my love, I'm out.